Very good afternoon to everyone. So now today is the second to the last session of our final FDP classes. I hope the lessons learned so far was helpful in improving your LaTeX skills. So till now we have seen from how to start up with the LaTeX through overleaf and then write the author name, how to write it in two different lines, then footnote. Then we have seen numbered, unnumbered, and nested list. And yesterday we have explored on how to insert the equations and how to align it, and also about cross-referencing. So with this brief, let us start today's session. So Apoorva ma'am, over to you.
Thank you for that summarization. Uh, Welcome all. Good afternoon. So, in today's session, um, we will be looking into tables and figures and also some helper tools to help us like put tables easily, right? So, let me create a file for today's session, day4.text. All right. So, quickly,
Your screen
anyone?
is not safe.
Oh,
Ma'am, your
screen.
screen is not safe.
Yeah, is it visible now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Um, so quickly, if anyone could say the commands that we need to just start off the LaTeX file, like the bare minimum commands that we need.
/ document class.
Okay, document class. Right,
Then use
let's.
package.
And then,
Use package. AMS Math or Math Tools.
so that is good to have, but apart from that, like, where do I put the body of the document?
Begin
Begin
document.
document and end document.
Yes, perfect. Begin and end document. Again, I won't get a PDF because I have no content in my document. Okay. So before we start tables and figures, let's quickly recap about the equations that we looked into in previous lesson, right? So let me create a section called recap. Now, if I want to create an inline equation, such as this, a is equal to 2, how can I do it? Right now it's in text mode, right?
A dollar before and after the equation.
Perfect. So the dollar. So this dollar starts a math mode. Now, if I would want an equation in display style, that is right in the middle, how can I do that?
Begin
Display
equation.
math. Display math function.
So you
Begin
can use, yeah, best is to stick with the begin equation. Okay. So I know that there are multiple ways, like you can use dollar dollar or backslash this thing. So I haven't put an equation. Um, say a is equal to 2. Right? So this also gives me an equation number. Now, if I would want unnumbered equation, how would I go about?
Asterisk.
Yes, the asterisk. Asterisk. Right? So now why am I getting this error? It says the equation asterisk environment is not defined.
We haven't used a package.
Yes. So we discussed yesterday that This equation star and text mode in our equation are all possible by using a package called AMS, American Mathematical Society, AMS Math. Right? Now it works. Now, say I would want to add a reference to this particular equation up top. So how do I go about doing that?
Label it.
Yes, label it. So can you just give me the line number where I can put the label? Like, should I put the label here in line 10 or in line 11 or line 14? Anyone? So basically, you would want to add the label associated with this particular entity, right? So it should be within this environment. So it can be at the beginning, at the end, it doesn't matter. So EQ colon, right? So we can just say my underscore equation. Now, if with this label, right, if I execute, there's no changes in the output PDF. But say I would want to say referring to, and now I would want to put the reference to the equation. Does anyone recall the command that we need to actually make the reference?
Autoref.
Yes, autoref. Autoref is good, but in order to use autoref, so if I use autoref, right? So I get saying undefined control sequence. So in order to use autoref, what do I need?
You need to use a package.
Yes. So we need to use the hyperref package, right? Now, in case you do not want to use the hyperref package, then you can just use the ref command, right? So you can see equation 1 has been added. Now we also quickly looked into the, if I would want multiple equations, right? If I would want multiple equations aligned at a particular point with each equation having its own number, what can I do? So say I would want to have y is equal to mx plus c, and then I would want to have a is equal to, or uh, b plus z, something like that, right? So if I would want to have these two equations, say I would want the equation number like sequentially 2, 3, and then I would want the equals to be aligned.
Ampersand equals.
Yes, ampersand, that is how we define the alignment point. But what is the environment that we will use? Can we use just the equation environment, or should we
Align.
use
Begin align.
perfect, right? So we'll start off with begin align, right? And I type in the equation y is equal to mx plus c. How do I tell LaTeX to go to the next line?
Double backslash.
Yes, double backslash. And how do I, somebody has already answered, we can like set the alignment point using the ampersand. Right? We get what we need. Now, say you would want multiple equations without numbers, you can always use the asterisk. Right? So let's move on to today's content of adding tables. Okay. So let
Excuse me,
me
ma'am.
create. Mhm.
Ma'am, suppose if you want to add two columns of equations, like to the left and right, y is equal to mx plus c, then next equation
Mhm.
is a is equal to b plus z. Okay, to one
Mhm.
column. Again, in the second column, I want one more equations.
Okay. So you can like create multiple points. Okay. So you can create like um, so say okay. So you can have multiple and but you need to be a bit careful because uh, it does this alignment of left and right, like alternating columns, right? So you can have multiple ampersand, but just make sure that by default, LaTeX does alternating alignment. For instance, if you have two columns, the first alignment is to the left, the second alignment will be to the right. Sometimes there is this alternating alignment that happens. Okay, so you have two columns of values. You can have multiple. All right. So what it looks into is like first thing is the column width assigned is as big as the um, longest equation that we have. Okay, so if I have something here, say for example, um, u plus v plus z plus a, not z, yeah, right? You can see that it everything gets moved, right? So at any point that you put that any point, alignment point that you put here, so what it does is the first entry will be kind of like left will be right aligned and this content will be left aligned. Okay, so you can think of an imaginary line being drawn like this. So think of a table. Okay, think of a table like this. So wherever you put the alignment point ampersand, on one side things will be right aligned, on the other side it will be left aligned. All right. So when you are trying to do columns, sometimes you will be like, the output might not be what you would expect. So try to draw these imaginary lines and try to think about this left alignment and right alignment. Okay, so you might have to do a bit of trial and error. However, right now we have what we want, right? Say you would want one more column, say you put another ampersand, right? So on and so forth.
Ma'am, but how to overcome this, ma'am?
So what you can do is you can uh, so there is no way to overcome it like this thing. What you can do is you can also use such these equation editors. All right, let me share this link for you. So yesterday I forgot to share it. Right, you can take the help of these equation editors, which are UI based editors, to help you fill in the equation. All right. The only thing, see, there's no challenge to overcome per se. All I'm trying to say is just be mindful that wherever you put the point of alignment, one side will be right aligned, the other side will be left aligned. So if I draw a column like this, right, you can see that Y is definitely within the space, it's like right aligned. So internally, LaTeX is doing this to help you get this illusion of the equals being aligned. Okay. So when you are using multiple ampersand, all I'm asking you to do is just be mindful that at the point of alignment, the LaTeX performs this. That's it. Okay, so you can keep on putting like ampersand, ampersand, right? So try a few examples. If you stumble, put it in WhatsApp and then I can take a look and I can guide you accordingly. Yeah.
Thank you.
Now we have already established that ampersand um, gives us the alignment point. So the same concept can be taken over to tables as well. So let me just quickly create a section to discuss tables. Now, uh, can anyone tell me when you see a table in the papers that you come across, right? You see what are the features of the table that you see? Okay, you have the rows and the columns, and what else do you see? You might have seen like this table numbering that happens, and also a caption, right, for the table. Like, what is this table showing? So there are two paths that go to a table. One is the content of the table, that is what goes in the rows and columns, and the second is the extra fluff that goes around the table, that is your captions, your numbers, and things like that. So let's look into each of it separately. Let's start off with a very simple table. So let's say in this subsection, we will just look into adding data to a table. Now, to add the data to a table, we have an environment called tabular. Tabular. Okay. Now, as soon as I clicked on begin tabular, some data was added to me. So let me just get rid of it so we can like build it step by step. Now, whenever we say begin tabular, so far we have had only environments with wherein we have specified what type of environment is it by giving an input to the begin command. Now, apart from this, the tabular environment needs another set of inputs. So this is setting up our table. Okay. Now, when we set up a table, right? So think of you imagine in Word when you would want to set up a table, you go there and you kind of like just pick the number of squares that you would want and the table will be added for you. Now, in this case, in the setup, we only set up the number of columns, right? And we also set up the alignment of column. Okay, so text alignment of each column. So let me elaborate this a bit. So for instance, in this case, I have C separated by a line. Okay, let's forget about the line for now. Okay, let's just make it CC. Now, what does this tell me? This tells me now how many C's that I have. I have two. So LaTeX will give me two columns in my table. Now, what does this C imply? C implies center alignment. Okay, it's centered. Now also you can use L and R. L implies left alignment, R implies right alignment. Make sense? So in the first line, we are setting up a table wherein we mention the number of columns and the text alignment of columns. So both this information is tied together. So the number of alignment information that we give is the number of columns that we have in the output. So let's try this. Okay, so now that we have set up our columns, we need to start filling up our data, right? So for instance, let's just fill up numbers. So let's say we have 100. So we have two columns, right? Two columns. So first place, say I want to put 100, second 20, and then I would want to put say 215. So I would want a table like this. So I'm done filling in the first value, okay, 100. Now I need to tell LaTeX that I'm done with this particular column. I need to start filling up the next column value. So to do that, I use the ampersand, all right? And then I put in the next value, right, 20. Now that I'm done with the row, I need to tell LaTeX, start a new row, okay? So to start a new row, I use, can anyone take a guess? So basically, I need to tell LaTeX, go start the next information in a new line, in the next line. How do we do it? Do it with a line or like other things? So it's double backslash, right? It's double backslash. Now I go to the next line. I say 200. I'm done with this particular column value. In order to start the next one, I just say ampersand 15. I'm now done filling the table. So let's see what happens. On compiling, you can see my data is like, so I have a table here, right? You can see 100, 20, 250. And what I would want to do is I would right now, my data is 100, 20, 250. I would like to separate it by a line. I would like to separate the columns by a line. So again, I can do that in this setup part. Here, I can just go and separate the C's by a vertical line. Okay. Now if I recompile, you can see a line has been added in the middle. Okay. So let's do another example. Say I would want to have three columns, right? 100, 20, and 2. 200, 15, and 5. Everything has to be center aligned. So can anyone tell me how to start off? Like what should be in the setup? Great. So everything needs to be center aligned. So how can I do this? So what goes in this particular curly brackets. So we can just start with, because everything has to be centered and we need 3 columns, we can say C, C. Okay. So number of alignments is equal to number of columns that we would want. C, C, C. Right. Now, I would want to type in the data. Okay. 100. 100. So the tabs don't matter. So 100, and then I put an ampersand indicating I'm done with this content. 20, again, I'm done with this content. 2, I'm done with this row. So go to next line. Right? Similarly, 200, ampersand, 15, ampersand, and 5. So let's execute this. Right? So forget about the alignment for now. Just make sure that your content is what you want it to be. Okay. So everything is centered. Now what happens if I change the middle one to left? Right? So let's make this a bit bigger. So if it was centered, right, you can see that the 15 is clearly centered, right? So if I say this is the width of my column, right, you can see 15 is clearly centered. But if I change this to L, you can see that 15 is now left aligned. If I now change this to R, you can see that 15 is right aligned. Okay. Now, say I would want to separate my columns by vertical lines. All I need to do is go here and put vertical lines. So you can see I have a vertical line separating each of the columns. Now say I would want a vertical line here at the beginning. Then what do I need to do? I again go to my setup part. Right before the first alignment information, I just put in another vertical line. Right? You can see that it's been added. Now, can anyone take a guess as to how I can add a line at the end?
A line after C.
Yes. So wherever the position is, we just have to go there in our setup right after the C alignment, the last alignment, we just put a vertical line. Right? So let's do another example where you all kind of like try to fill in to create a table in LaTeX, the one that I draw on screen, okay? So say we would want Let's stick with, again, 2 columns, right? Say 10,000 and let this be 20, right? And 2,000, right? How do I go about making such a table? You can all take a few minutes.
Begin tabular
Mm-hmm.
and
Begin. Okay.
and within the curly braces,
Mm-hmm.
L,
Okay. L.
a vertical line,
Okay.
R,
R.
and again a vertical line,
Okay.
and in the next line,
Mm-hmm.
10
Mm-hmm.
and 20. I mean the
Okay.
and symbol,
Yeah.
and double backslash,
Okay.
1,000 and 2,000.
Right. Perfect. Right. It's exactly what I wanted. Right. This is how you do it. Would you want me to repeat any of these parts regarding the alignment, the vertical lines?
Ma'am.
You would want me to repeat it?
Yes, ma'am, the vertical line.
Okay, sure. So the alignment part you all understand, right? The C and the L and the R.
Yeah.
Okay. So the vertical line is whenever we have a table, it is possible that we would want just the outside lines or the internal lines or anything, right? So let's just build a table such as what we have done: 100, 20, 200, 15. So what you would want to do is you would want to draw these lines, right? So you need to uh, you need to mention all this in the table setup itself. Okay. So usually if these lines were not present and say everything was centered, you would just say C in the curly brackets, right? Now instead, if you would want lines, you need to specify where these lines should be, because in a cell, how many vertical lines possible? It's possible. It's possible there's one is here, one is here, and one is here. Right? These are the 3 possible vertical lines. So we need to explicitly mention. So imagine I write something like this. So each of them, I have a vertical line at the beginning, then I have an entry, then I have another vertical line. I have another entry, and then another vertical line. Now, when you give such a specification and you give all the data, how LaTeX does is it looks up the specifications that you have given and the content needs to be filled. So say this is the content 120. So the first content it reads is 120. When it does, it sees the specification, it writes 100 line 20. And obviously another line because that's what we have specified here. Now it reads the next line. The next line is 215. So each time it adds an entry, it adds these vertical lines because that is what is specified in the table setup. And what happens, the repeated drawing of these vertical lines gives the illusion of boundaries. Right? So that is why when you are trying to construct the table, in the setup, you give three information. One, the number of columns. Second, the alignment of text in each column, as well as vertical lines. Right? So when you are specifying the vertical line, all you have to say is, where do I need the vertical lines? Right? So you are defining your alignment as say CRC. Okay. So for an example, you would want the lines, say you don't want this line. Okay. And you don't want this line. So basically you would want only the inside lines. So you go right next to the alignment where you want the line, you just mention it. Now, obviously there is a catch here for the outside lines. If you would want a line at the beginning, you need to specify a line at the beginning. If you would want a line at the end, you would want to specify a line at the end. It's kind of like a one-to-one mapping, right? So here, you see I have two columns and one is left aligned, the other is right aligned. Now, where do I want the lines? Here and here. It's kind of like a one-to-one mapping if you just write the alignment below the table that you want to generate. Does this make sense? Or still confused? You can tell me, no worries. I can to explain it.
Thank you, ma'am. It's clear.
Oh, all right. So wherever you would want the line, just write the alignment and put the lines in the corresponding spots. That's pretty much it. Okay. Now we spoke at length about the vertical lines. Okay. So let's take this table, right? Whatever we constructed last. Now say, let's talk about horizontal line. I would want to add an horizontal line at the top and at the bottom. So I would like to add a horizontal line at the top and at the bottom. In order to do that, so we can think to generate a horizontal line, we have something called as the H-line command. Because we would want a horizontal line at the top, so what we need to do is as soon as we enter into the tabular environment, the first thing we would want to do is draw a horizontal line. To do that, we use the \H-line command. So here, \H-line should draw me a horizontal line, right? So you can see I have a horizontal line at the top now. Now, can anyone take a guess? Where should I put the H-line command in order to get the line at the bottom?
After the second entry, the next line after the second entry.
So basically at the end, right? Now, will this work? I get an error saying misplaced alignment. Okay. So the problem is I need to say that I need to tell LaTeX explicitly before drawing the line, go to the next line and draw. Okay. Now it works. Did that part make sense? So if I do not, we always ended our table like this, right? Because we didn't have any more information to fill. Now, if you put your last row of data and then try to start drawing your H line, what it will do is it will try to draw somewhere here, all right? So that's not what we want. What we would want is we would want to tell LaTeX explicitly, go to the next line and then start drawing. So that is why after the last row, you need to still have the double backslash for LaTeX to know that it needs to be drawn in the next line. All right. Now say I would want a vertical line here. How do I do this?
Before L, we give a vertical line.
Yes. Before L, we give a vertical line. So vertical lines, the placement, you define it in the setup here. Horizontal lines, you mention it here. Okay. Say you would want a horizontal line between these two rows as well. Then what can I do?
After 10 and 20, backslash and H line.
Yes. So then we can just say wherever you want, between whatever rows you would want the horizontal line, you go to the corresponding place and say backslash H line. That's it. Make sense? Would you all want to do another example or you all good? Okay, let's do one more example. So right now we have 10, 20, 200, 15, right? So there is no header specifically, right? We need to give the illusion of header in the table. Say I would want to do something like this: price, quantity. 10, 20, 100, 20, 200, 15, okay, 300, right? And say 10. And then what I would want is something like this, right? So let's start building our table. Assume both are center aligned. So we can say begin tabular, right? So let's set up our vertical lines. So do I need a line between the two C's? No. So where do I need the vertical lines?
Before the first C and after the second C.
Yeah, it's just a one-to-one mapping as to where you would want a vertical line, right? Okay. Now, let's start filling in the data. So what is the first row of information that we have?
Price and quantity.
Price and quantity. Perfect. So I know that I'm trying to say that's a header, but we don't have such concept. So we just enter it as a row. Okay. And then what do we do next? So we have price and quantity.
In the next line, we type H line.
H line, because you can see that right after this row, we have a horizontal line. So to get this horizontal line, we use the H line command. Right? So next, what do we type in?
100 ampersand 20.
Mm-hmm.
And then two backslash, double backslash.
Mm-hmm.
And then 200 ampersand 50.
Okay. Do I need a H line here between these two rows?
No.
No, because in my output, I don't need a horizontal line, right? Okay. Double backslash 300 ampersand. That, okay. So is this it?
After the double backslash, we give H line.
Okay, perfect. So do not forget the double backslash in the end of the last row. H line. Right? So we get, So what are we missing here? We are almost close, right? So what are we missing here? We're missing the horizontal line on top of price and quantity, right?
After begin tabular, we give on the next line, we give H line.
Yes, perfect. So we say H line. So when you are building a table in LaTeX, it's a one-to-one mapping. So in your setup, it's a one-to-one mapping between the alignment and the vertical lines. When you start entering the data, it's a one-on-one mapping on where all you would want the horizontal lines. So say you would want horizontal line at the beginning. That means before we add the entry, price and quantity, right, I would want a horizontal line there. Now say after price and quantity here, we would need a horizontal line, and that is where the corresponding H line comes into picture. Any doubts with this example? Let's take it one step further, right? From what the typesetting that we did, like text typesetting that we did in yesterday's lesson, say I would want to make price and quantity in bold. How can I do that?
Text BF.
Okay, text BF, or if you don't remember this thing, you can always highlight and press Control B. Right, highlight whichever you would want and say Control B. Now if we execute, okay, you can see price and quantity are both in bold. Right? So let's take a 5-minute break here. Right? Let's meet at 2:35, and you can use this break to kind of like digest whatever we have said. Right? And if you have any doubts, you can ask me at that point. All right. So we'll meet at 2:35. Hi all, let's continue. Right? All this is fine, but I would like to do more with the table, right? One thing is, I would like to add further information such as captions, and I would also would want a table number associated with it. So tabular is just an environment to fill in the data that goes into the table. However, if you want all the fancy things, you would have to create another environment called table environment. So in this subsection, let's look into the table environment. Let's start with the same way we did tabular, begin table. Right? As soon as we did, there's so many things got added. Let's just remove this. Okay. Now this table, you can think of it as a wrapper around tabular. So what we need to do is, into the table environment, we now need to place the tabular environment. All right. Let's see what happens. Okay, let's forget about this square bracket that it adds. Right, where is my table? So you can see it's up top. Right? So the table environment, within the table environment, we need to place the data as form of tabular environment. Now, the table environment gives us two things. One is the extra fluff, and other is position of the table. Now, whatever happens to your tabular environment, it will be where it is placed. That means the tabular environment always comes exactly in the position as it is in your code editor. However, if you use the table environment, LaTeX does some intelligent placing. So what it says is, say you have a page. Okay, so you have a page. Now you add some content, right? Say you put tabular here. The problem is if there is not enough space to to put your entire table, what LaTeX does is it starts a new page and then puts in your table. The problem of doing this style is that your pages will have some awkward gaps, no? Suddenly your content, your document will end abruptly in the middle of the page, and then the table is in the next page. So LaTeX mission is to avoid this unwanted empty spaces in your paper. So to overcome that, it does this intelligent placement of table. So that is why table environment is something called as a floating environment. It is not as fixed as a tabular, it can float around. So if you have content like this, it will be like, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the table up top, then fill in your content so that the content seamlessly goes into the next page. Now this is good because it avoids this abrupt gaps in your empty spaces in your paper. But unfortunately, this can be a bit tiresome as well. Sometimes you're okay with your with your paper or page abruptly stopping somewhere here as well, right? But what you would want to do is give preference for the table to be in the vicinity where you are talking about it, right? So if you are talking about in this particular line, you would want the table somewhere close. So we would have to tell this intention to LaTeX. To do that, we do have the optional input to the table environment, as to where do we want the table to be placed. We will come to that shortly. For now, note that the table environment is a floating environment. There is a big chance that where your table environment is in your code editor versus where it is rendered in your PDF might not match. The reason it might not match is because LaTeX performs this intelligent placement of table where it moves around to avoid empty spaces in your paper. Right? With that in mind, we will look into how we can change the position of the table. For now, just bear with me. All right. So what we have done is we have added the content to a table using the tabular environment. So we still need the tabular environment. All we are doing is wrapping it up in a table environment. So we have the flexibility of movement, and we also have the option to add captions. Okay. So let's do that. So just after this, after we define the table, we can have backslash caption. Okay. Say price quantity table. Okay. As soon as I add the caption, tell me what changes happened in my table. Not price equals to quantity, price and quantity. Yeah. So what are the changes that happened in my output document? So obviously, whatever input that I give to the caption has been displayed, price and quantity table. But something else happened. We also got a table number, right? All this was automatically given to me by this caption command. Now the caption command is nice and centered. So let me also center my data as well. So just before begin, I'm saying centering. Okay, so centering is kind of like a switch command. It always keeps being active. However, because I'm using the centering in the table environment, it is active only within the table environment. Okay, so these commands are called switch commands. So that means these commands effect will be active unless we use some other command, or if we use in a localized space as such as the example here. Okay, so we use only within the table environment. We say everything has to be centered. All right. So now if I say begin table, this should make sense to us, right? Most of it should make sense to us, right? Forget about this and forget about this. Yeah. So centering, what it does is centers the table. And tabular environment, this is where we actually build the table, right? Define and build table. And this caption command, it adds caption and table numbers. Right? Does this make sense, or would you want me to repeat anything? Table is a bit tricky. Do not worry, like just try to understand the basics. I will show you some aids to help you write tables easily. But what I do want you to understand is the basics of tables, right? the table environment, the tabular environment, and things like that. However, to write very complex tables, I will show you some aids to help you do that. Okay. So for now, does table environment make sense to you? Like any doubts with respect to this particular example that I have here?
Ma'am, what is the difference between tabular and table?
Okay. So in tabular, we cannot have captions. Like tabular does not have the option to add captions. Right? So, and also another thing is tabular's position is fixed. Right? So what happens is, if, say for instance, say you have a big table here. If you put it in tabular, okay, so we have a table here and then we have some content here. Okay, some lines of code here, some lines here. What happens is, if you put this table in just tabular, it sees, LaTeX sees that we do not have enough space to put this table here. So what happens? It starts a next page, right? It starts a next page and puts your table and the following content. Now what happens? In your paper, you will have some empty space here that is not filled up. The idea is you would want to avoid such empty spaces in your documents. Okay. So to overcome that, if you put the table in a table environment, what happens is, so we would have table, right? And the content below it. So because table is floating type and there is no space to fit this table, what it does is it moves the content that comes after the table right here. And then in the next page, you have your table. So this way you do not have these empty spaces in your document. Does this make sense? So let me just try to simulate this example here. So say blind text, we haven't used the package, right? Okay. So let's add more content. Right. Do you see how the table went to the next line? Right. If I remove the table part, okay. Right. So the thing is the tabular comes here and then the content comes here. So let me make the table even bigger so it doesn't have space to fit in here. Right. Do you see this awkward spacing? Because I put tabular and the table did not fit here, the space is just empty, right? So if someone is reading your document, right, this is how they see it, right? They just see some empty space here. However, if I now change this, if I activate my table environment, right, you can see there's a smooth transition. Right, I know the table is in the middle here, we can fix that, but you see how your page does not abruptly end with some empty spaces, right? So if you put in table, this is one of the advantages. The second advantage is you get table numbers and captions and all those extra stuffs with the table. Make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. All right. So let's do a bit of referencing. All right. Um, say I would want to say the price information is summarized in. So here I would want to add the reference to a table. Okay. Now, how can I do that? So I know that this table environment is giving me, within the table environment, I'm using this caption command, which is giving me the table number. Now, in order to reference the table, what is the first step I need to do?
Label
Yes, perfect. Now, where should I put the label? Should I put it after the table environment,
within the environment.
within the environment, right? So I say label. So you remember the convention that we have been using, entity type colon, right? And then the name. So here it's a table. So usually we say tab and then say price. So now that I have the label at the point of reference, I can use ref or auto ref command. So if I use auto ref, I get the entity type as well, tab price, right? So this entity type, or it additional help is, yeah, it does minimize label collision, but also it helps you to be doubly sure that you only referring to a table. And also when the list that we get, we can also filter it. As soon as I tab, I only get the table labels. Right? You can see the price information is summarized in table 1. Now, let's come to the table environment and let's talk about how we can control the positioning. Okay. There are multiple ways to control the positioning. The first, by default, it goes to the center, right, of an empty page. What we can do is we can give us suggestions. Say, we can say T, right? T implies top of the paper. So again, this is a suggestion. If we say we would want at the top, we can like force it to put an exclamation. Now, what happens is, even if we put an exclamation, it is still not um, like abiding by it, right? So the reason being, say if I have one more plain text here, I have more content, right? So what LaTeX does is, whatever suggestions that you put here, it will accept it. However, it has its internal rules which can override it. So there are two levels. One is a suggestion which is top, bottom, here. Now you can like enforce the severity of the suggestion. Say that you would want to follow this suggestion all the time, right? As much as possible. You would want to make it best effort. So you would put an exclamation. Apart from this, you have other packages that can help you force these, but by default, this is what it is. Okay. So TBH, and if you see an exclamation, right, next to it, you're saying that it is not just a suggestion of leave it, like if you can do it, but it's more like try your best and achieve this, right? It's an extra. You're telling LaTeX that you really, really want it. Okay, so you have at the bottom, right? So it tried putting at the bottom and it went to the next page, right? So what we can do is there are packages that such as commands such as float barriers. So you can say, okay, let me define a barrier at this point so that it does not move across this line. Okay. You also have here H. Apart from that, you can give the suggestion this thing like TBH. So what this does is, um, yeah, so what it does is you're just specifying the order. First, try to put it in the top. If you can't, put it in the bottom. Otherwise, you place it here. So you can give an order, a mixture of them. Okay. And then you can put an exclamation at the end to say that this suggestion should be, you really have to try your best to do it. Okay. Apart from this, you also have the so here is not possible because there's not enough space, right? You can also do capital H. Okay, so to use package float. So let's include that. Right? What happened? We kind of like simulated, right? So remember what I said, that using packages, we can enforce it to even further. So float gives us the option of capital H. Now capital H means override all your internal rules and use whatever option that I give here. So I say capital H. I want it to be exactly where it is in the code editor. So basically I'm simulating this tabular environment. So when you use this particular option, you have to be careful. Use it when you have finalized your document and are confident where your table will be, right? Otherwise, if you are not, try to give options such as this, right? So this way, it will like make sure your pages don't have this abruptly ends, right? So let me keep both versions so you can play around with it later. So capital H is good, but use it only when you're confident that you will not, like, at the final stages of your document, you're confident that, okay, if your table comes here, you should be fine. Okay. So just a quick recap. When it comes to positioning, we have the T, B, and H, top, bottom, and here. These are just suggestions, mild suggestions. So, however, LaTex will try to do what it wants. If possible, it will listen to you. Okay. So, otherwise, if you would want to be really strict with your suggestion, you put an exclamation. So here too, LaTex will take it seriously, but it will make sure that its first priority is still to avoid awkward spaces, awkward empty spaces in your document. However, using the float package, we can use the capital H, where we say your priority should be to listening to me and not going about trying to remove the spaces. So when you use the capital H, you have the full and final control about the positioning of the table. Right? So let's quickly look into figures and also try to fix the issue Geeta ma'am had she had posted an issue which she had with figures um, in the chat, right? So figures and tables are kind of like, sorry, before we go to figures, there's one other thing that I would like to show it to you is this particular UI. It's called tables generator. Okay, let me share the link with you. Now, a tables generator is a very neat way of graphically creating tables. All right. So, for instance, you have the option to create the tables, but you also have the option to import tables from your Excel sheets. Okay. So what you can do is, if you have already created a table in Excel, you can export it as a CSV file and upload it here. So you don't have to manually type in the data. Having said that, let's say create new table. Okay. So when we want to create a new table, it asks how many rows and columns that we want. So let's try and build a price table, right? This particular price table using this. So maybe a much smaller one with just 3 rows. Okay. So how many rows do we have? So I would want to build a table with only the 3 rows, the first 3 rows, and 2 columns. So 3 rows and 2 columns. Great. You can always change this later on. Sorry, it's 4 rows, right? Because the first row is the header. Yeah. So you go to row and say insert one more row above or below, it's fine. Okay, so we have 4 rows and 2 columns. Let's type in a value: price, quantity, right? So what is the price? 100, 200, 300. Ah, sorry. Okay, 100, 200, and 300. Okay, now what are our quantities? 20, 15, and 10. 20, 15, and 10. Right? So once you're happy with the table, you can go down here and say generate. Right? In fact, if you have a table caption, you can also put it here. So you can say price summarization. Right? And say generate. You can see the caption is automatically picked up. Now the label, by default, it keeps using tab my table. We can use tab my price, right? And click generate. So basically, it gives you a UI to fill in your all the options, right? This is the UI to fill in your tabular, and this is the UI to fill in your caption, and then this is the UI to fill in the label. Once you're done, click on generate. Okay. Let's copy this. I believe this, yeah, this copy to clipboard up here. Go to our code editor and paste this. Now, once we paste this, let me zoom in a bit. It's almost there, right? So we have the price, quantity, all the data, but we still do not have the borders. So we would want the outermost borders, right? So let's go ahead and add that. Yeah. So select the column and just say, yeah, we can activate and deactivate. So this is the one. So let's hold shift, select it. Let's hold shift and then select the column, wherever you would want the lines to be. And then, so basically you can say, I would want the outermost border, right? So I would want borderline here and borderline here, right? So to select a specific border, you can use this third option, click on it. And then if you just select one, you have to do for all of them manually. Instead, before selecting, click on shift and select them. So that way it replicates it for all the rows as well. Make sense? Now with just this, if I say generate, what do you see? Do you see this vertical line added? Perfect. Now, same thing, we would want the horizontal line up top. So hold shift and click here. So it replicates it. And then we would want a horizontal line here, hold shift and it will replicate. Hover, hold shift and replicate. Let's generate now. You can see how H line has been added wherever we would want horizontal lines. Copy to clipboard, go to our code editor and replace this. Right? Almost there. We would want our data to be centered. Right now, it is left. Obviously, we can go ahead and do CC here to get its center alignment. Right? It's centered. Alternatively, say you would want to do this, you can click on these. So you can say center, center, right? And then click generate. Don't forget to click generate after you make changes. So if you don't click on generate, it won't pick up the changes that you have made in the UI up top. So you can see the LL has been replaced to CC. All right. So let's replace the table here with this. All right. Do you want me to show you another example to use the UI? Or you're all clear how to use this tables generator?
Ma'am, can you repeat?
Okay, sure. So we will try building this table again from scratch, okay? So when you would want to create a new table, go to File, click on New Table, right? Alternatively, you can also load your table data from your CSV. So if you have any data in your Excel, you can always export it as CSV and then import it here. Click on New Table. Select the number of rows and columns that you have. Say 3 and 2. So this is not like a final, so you don't have to fixate too much to this number. Put some number that makes sense to you, because once you have the table here, you can always add more columns and rows using these options. Say here I would want an additional row here. I just go to row and say I would want somewhere at the end, right? So I just select the position where I would want and say insert below. It adds a row below the selection. All right. So once you have defined the number of rows and columns, we have to go and add the data, right? So let's go to the first part. So in order to add the data, just double click in the wherever you would want to add. So let's say yeah. So wherever you would want to add data, just select the cell and you can start typing. So say I would want to put price and the second one is quantity. All right. Say I would want to have another column. Okay. Just say I would want to have another column. Say insert column to the right. Okay. Right now that column does not have an heading. Okay. Just leave that there. So let's fill in our price 100, 200, 300 and the quantity 20, 15 and 10. All right. Say I have another quantity information 25, 60, 20. Okay. So let's say this is the quantity of purchased by person A and this is the quantity purchased by person B. Okay. So let's say quantity A. And for now, let's call this quantity B. All right. So far, is it clear? We're just like selecting the cell, entering the data, pretty much what you would do in your Excel. Now the question comes as to how to add the border. So let me just say price for quantity for person A and B as the caption, right? And just say tab quantity A, B. So either you can use hyphen in your names to separate, or you can use underscore, right? If I say generate, fine. All this looks fine, right? All the elements are in place. But I still would want to add borders. If you would want to add borders everywhere, you click on the first button. So whatever your selection is, it adds border around that. Now, if you would want to remove all borders around a selection, you can just click on this remove all borders. Okay. If you would want on the entire thing, you can just select it all. So edit, undo, right? So let's say we remove the border. Say you would want to select the entire table. On the upper left hand side, do you see this empty square? If you just click on that, it will select the entire table. And then you can do this. So what this does is it adds H lines everywhere and all the vertical lines wherever it's needed. We can generate it to see, you can see we have vertical lines everywhere and we have a horizontal line after every row. So this simulates the border, right? Let's copy this and go and see how it looks here. Right? So this is basically whatever we are building, it's exactly how it looks in LaTeX, right? And this is the code associated with it. Now, coming back, I do not want it everywhere. Sorry. Let me remove it. So again, I select the entire table. Do you see this remove all borders? I just select on that and removes all the borders. Now, what I would like to do is I would like to have a boundary only on the outside. Okay. So what I can do is you can do this conditional activation deactivation. So instead of selecting all borders, using this, we can do individual selection, whether we want it only on the left or on the right or on the top or at the bottom. So first click on this so that we can individually select the side where we want the borders. Say I would want the border here. Now what I need to do is I need to keep on selecting for every cell so that I get the entire border like this. Instead, what you can do is if you want this border to be applied on all cells in that particular column, you can just before clicking on the border, click on shift and then select the border. That time it automatically selects it. Now if I generate, you can see I only have vertical line at the beginning, at the end. Right? So you can always copy this, go to your LaTeX, paste it to double check everything is working. Right? Even though the code is generated for us, hopefully you are able to understand what is happening. Right? That is my objective. So my objective is not for you to learn how to straight away learn how to create fancy tables. At least a given code, you understand where the data goes, what the styling is, what this vertical line is, and what these horizontal lines are. So it helps you debug the code better. Okay. Now coming back, say I would want these horizontal lines, right? So I would want to select the horizontal line here. To do that, I just hover, click on shift and select all, right? If I just hold shift, it will automatically select all. Hold shift, select all. So what this gives me is the advantage that I don't have to go everywhere and click like this, right? Just Clicking on shift will automatically select every border in that direction. Is this clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So let's generate, copy, and then paste it here. So makes your life easier, right? But I do urge you to do a few by hand so you can like debug if there are any mistakes that happens here, because sometimes you can't, like, if you're unable to translate what you want and using this UI, I still want you to go back and take a look and make changes that you want. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to do something um, extra. Okay. So I would want to merge these two into a single column quantity. Okay. So to do that, there is this option called multi-column. Okay. This multi-column takes 3 inputs. So in this case, I would like to merge the header. Okay. In this particular, this thing, instead of quantity A, quantity B, I just want it to be price quantity. Right. And then furthermore, under quantity, I would want to have 2 columns like this. So basically, in the 2 columns here, I would want to merge into one. That's what this multi-column does. So in this case, I'm merging 2 columns. So the first input is how many columns are you merging? The second input is what is the alignment of the merged column? Okay, so after merging, do you want the word quantity to be left aligned, right aligned? How would you want it? So I would say I would want it to be centered. Finally, you would want to specify what goes into the merged column. So just say quantity. Right? So this is how you would do it. Let's see how using the UI we can do. So select the cells that you would like to merge. It's not letting me select. Merge selected cells. Okay. No. It's selected. So I just had to drag it. Yeah. So just click on your mouse and just drag it. Okay. In the direction you would want to merge. So these are the 2 cells I would like to merge. So let's say merge. So as soon as I merged, it just filled in some default value. So let's say it's quantity. Say it's just quantity. And then I would want to add a border to this. So let's select this and put a border here. All right. And then let's click on generate. You can see it automatically generated this multi-column command that we had. All right. So right now, this one is centered. Sorry, it's left aligned. I would want to be centered. So I just select it and click on center and say generate. You can see the L has been changed to C. Now here also in the second column with the alignment, we also specify any vertical lines it's possible. So here after quantity, we would want to end it with a vertical line. So that is why you have a vertical line here. Now, if I add a line here, say for instance, and say generate See, this multi-column one actually does not make sense, right? This is what I mean. It's not perfect. It gives you the intended output, but it is not perfect. You can make the code smaller if you would want. Okay. So if we go ahead, let's play around with this multi-column a bit. Yeah, this is the table 4, quantity. We have 3 warnings. Yeah, that's fine. We have multiple defined labels. Let's say quantity merged for this one. Right? So what I'm trying to say is this gives us the intended output, but we could still get our output by just doing something like this as well. Right? So it gives us the necessary output, but what I have observed with this tables generator link that I've shared with you is that sometimes it just adds some unnecessary code. So instead of doing whole thing, all it needed to do was put an extra line just before C, right? But instead it just created another multi-column which was not needed. Now, because I know the basics of the table, I know that I don't need this. What is multi-column one? Multi-column is used to merge more than one cells, right? So what are you doing merging only one cell? It does not make sense, right? So, and I know that I can specify vertical lines before, right? So that's why use knowing the basics of table helps. Even though you have a generator such as this to give you the code, you can write better meaningful code than what this particular UI gives you. Any doubts with respect to multi-column?
Ma'am,
Mm-hmm.
in the second curly braces for multi-column command, we get the alignment of the column merged or the ones to be merged.
No, the columns, the resulting merged column. So it's like after merging, how would you want this quantity to be aligned? Right? Would you want it to be centered, right, or left? Okay, so to make more sense, let's let's undo this, right? Let's make a quantity really big. Right? So now if I say quantity is left aligned, you see, it says after merging, how would you want this to be written, the word quantity to be written? Would you want it to be left aligned? Would you want it to be right aligned? So if it's R or C, make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So there's one last thing that I would like to talk about in tables. Table has a really nice package called the book tabs. Okay. So if you see here, there is this default table style, which is whatever you're seeing now. And the other one is the book tabs table style. Okay. So to use the book tabs table style, you need to use the package book tabs. Okay. So let's go ahead in our code and up top say use package book tabs. Right. Now what book tabs does is it gives you different types of lines, and also it also gives you this additional listing where the columns are rows a bit spread out. So for instance, let me copy the book tabs version and then we can see what's the difference. So let's say quantity merged, right? Book tabs. So we have already done this. So let's get rid of that. Right? So there is some alignment issue here. We'll come to that. I don't know why it is doing what it is doing. Right? This is what I said. It's not perfect. Especially when you change it in the middle. There is no line here. So as soon as I said book tabs version, some alignment changed. So let me just make this coherent, okay? Yeah, looks good. Yeah, generate. Yeah, now it's better. All right. So what are the differences that you see here? Are you seeing some additional commands in this particular example? Now, I ask you this question. In order to get the horizontal line, which command were we using?
H line.
H line. So in order to get the horizontal lines, we are using different commands here called top rule, mid rule, and bottom rule. Right? And do you see how, I mean, let's remove these vertical lines for now. Right? Vertical line from here as well. Now, when you see these two tables, which looks much readable to you?
First one.
So for me, this is because do you think the first one is more readable? Why do you think so? Like you think, okay, let's say first and second. Why do you think the first one is more readable to you? So for me, I would prefer the second one. I know that I have put like the same. Mostly because the contents are more spread out, right? Here, everything looks a bit cramped up, right? If you see the height of the table versus this and this, there is sufficient spacing that goes on the top and bottom of every row. Whereas here, it looks a bit cramped up, no? Don't you agree? Do you see the extra spread out in the table? I mean, if
Yes,
you
ma'am.
prefer, it's all preferential, okay? If you think this is good for you, you can go ahead. But all I'm saying is, this is much easier on the eyes because, like, the contents are more spread out. Another thing is, there is no differentiating line between the top and the bottom. However, this book tabs gives us contextual lines, such as top rule and bottom rule. Now, what top rule and bottom rule is, do you see that it's much thicker than the middle line? So top rule and bottom rule adds extra thick lines. Okay. And another thing with bottom rule is, so it adds a bit of spacing towards the end as well, right? And the mid rule is much thinner. So this way you can like differentiate between, you can add a nice, it looks a little fancier, right? It looks a little fancier than this version. So using this contextual lines such as top rule and bottom rule, where the top rule, right, adds a bit of spacing up top and bottom rule adds a bit of spacing at the bottom, right? Mid rule gives us a nice thin line so that the it looks a bit fancier than using the same thickness line all along. Now, if you would want the same thickness line all along, you can use the default one, right? H line. However, if you want to differentiate the boundary lines at the top and bottom, you can use bottom rule, right? Top rule, bottom rule, and mid rule. So any borders within the table, you use the mid rule. Any lines, horizontal lines at the top and bottom, you would use top rule and bottom rule respectively. So book tabs lets you do all these customizations. You can also use this to add colors to your document, right? We haven't discussed much about it. You can see set background colors. So for instance, let me disable this, right? So for these two, I would want to select the color. Say, you don't usually use this, but if you want to try around, say, would want to set this particular color, right? And say generate. Now, in order to do anything with colors in LaTeX, you would want to use Xcolor, the Xcolor package, right? And then you can use the cell color. You can give the color coding either in HTML format or in hexadecimal format, anything that you would want it to be, right? So if I copy to clipboard and paste it here, now I will get a few errors. Why? Right? This is not defined, so I have to use the package. So go to our preamble, put the necessary package, compile, right? Do you see it has this background color? Now you can make it much more polished because this is not taking up the entire space. One thing you can do is, you might see this vertical line is not that nice looking as it is in the normal version. That is because book tabs was written in the perspective that you should minimize the use of vertical lines because they say that it makes your data looks a bit broken up. So it says minimize the use of vertical lines. In fact, even LaTeX as a whole has minimal support for vertical lines, the vertical borders. Right? You can do your own research for like different types of tables that you would want. But I believe this tables generator is a good starting place. It does sometimes do some nonsense if we kind of like give some weird combinations. Hopefully, the basics that we have covered here will help you refine the code a bit, right? Don't just blindly copy paste it. Always go through it. All right. Any questions? See, table is a bit of a challenge in LaTeX. So that is why people like use these UI. Also, alternatively, you can always import your data and just make changes to your the decorative styles of your table here. All right. So that's it for today. Figures is actually we will take about 15 minutes tomorrow. Very quickly we will be able to do. And tomorrow we will also do how to add references in our section, like bibliography section. Yeah. If you have any questions, you can ask at this point. Otherwise, we are done for today. Vidyaman?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, tomorrow we don't have a session. The next session will be on Saturday, ma'am.
So, any doubts in today's session? So now we are at the end of the second last session. So almost we are through LaTeX. So the last session, as ma'am already said, you will have on figures and then maybe one paper, right?
Yes, ma'am.
IEEE or any other paper format. She'll be explaining on that, how to take the comments and write it using that. So we have 1 day gap also before the last session. So you all can do certain little assignment in the sense that work on this LaTeX software and try to have questions. Please utilize this opportunity and try to clear all your doubts through this platform. So we will meet again on Saturday. And Saturday being the last session, we will have a group photograph. So be ready towards the end, and then we'll be circulating the feedback form, maybe during the session or after the session. So mostly we'll keep it after the session, either through email or through the WhatsApp. We'll be sending the feedback form. Once you fill the feedback form and the final assignment, you'll be receiving your certificates. So please don't miss on the last session. So thank you from my end. Thank you, Apoorva ma'am, and thank you all the participants for today.